They're all my favorites.
There's so many good ones.
Yeah, I love doing.
In Hollywood, love is rare, and to be loved by a legend like Anthony Hopkins is something that only a select few can boast of. With a career spanning over 6 decades, Hopkins has played kings, killers, and countless complex souls, earning Oscars, BAFTAs, and the respect of an entire industry. But behind the characters and accolades lies a man who has quietly cherished some of his colleagues in the industry. Now at 87, Hopkins has opened up to share the names of 8 actors he loved the most. According to him, the number 2 actor on his list is one new talent that he sees as his own child. Without much ado, let's dive into the list. Number 8. Richard Burton.
I remember meeting Richard Burton, and he signed an autograph for me.
According to Hopkins, getting to know Richard Burton was the very reason he chose acting. Burton was from his hometown, and he got to meet him for the first time when he was 15 years old. Hopkins shared that while growing up, he was not good in academics, and was that kid that other kids didn't want to play with. Not being good at education was a serious concern to both him and his parents. Him and everyone around him was so unsure about what path he'd take in life until he met Burton. Coming in contact with Burton and learning about him was the best thing that happened to him as a teenager. Almost immediately, he decided he was going to be famous like Burton, and that was the very beginning of everything that made him who he is today. Hopkins described himself as a lost boy until Burton became a symbol of hope. Burton had grown up in the same kind of Welsh working-class environment with the same tough conditions, yet he had made his way out into the world, dazzling audiences on stage and screen. Burton was proof that someone from Port Talbot could stand tall in Hollywood, command respect, and inspire millions. He clung to that thought with determination, using it as fuel whenever self-doubt tried to crush him. When Hopkins later trained at the Royal Welsh College of Music and Drama, he carried Burton's name like a torch. By the late 1960s, Hopkins had a chance to work more closely within the circles Burton moved. Hopkins admitted that whenever he questioned his career choice, he reminded himself that Burton had already proven it was possible. Burton wasn't just an idol. He was a personal reassurance that Hopkins had a place in the acting world. In his words, without Burton, there would be no Anthony Hopkins. Number 7. Laurence Olivier. Hopkins said that if Richard Burton lit the spark of acting in him, Laurence Olivier fanned it into a roaring flame. By the time Hopkins was beginning his career in the late 1960s, Olivier was not just a towering figure in British theater, but one of the most respected actors in the world. For a young Welshman still finding his way, being accepted by someone like Olivier was nothing short of life-changing. Hopkins often recalled a defining story from 1967 when he joined the National Theatre under Olivier's leadership. He was still young, anxious, and insecure, trying to find his footing among seasoned actors. One day, Hopkins was called upon to step into the role of Othello at the last minute because another actor had fallen ill. The idea of filling in for a production led by Olivier himself was terrifying. Hopkins, with trembling hands and racing heart, went on stage. To his surprise, he not only managed to carry the role, but delivered a performance that left Olivier deeply impressed. After the show, Hopkins expected criticism for not being polished enough. Instead, Olivier walked straight up to him, placed his hand on his shoulder, and told him he did just fine. That moment of encouragement from a man Hopkins considered untouchable became one of the pillars of his career. He said that those words were more than flattery. They were a gift of belief, a reminder that he had a place in the world of acting. Whenever doubt crept in, Hopkins replayed Olivier's voice in his mind, pushing himself to live up to that early praise. Olivier also inspired Hopkins by the way he worked. He was disciplined, meticulous, and fearless in taking risks with his characters. Hopkins admired his ability to transform completely on stage and screen, disappearing into roles with a fluidity that seemed almost supernatural. That early act of acceptance created a bond. Hopkins never forgot that Olivier had seen potential in him at a time when he could barely see it in himself. In Hopkins' words, Olivier wasn't just a legend of theater and film, he was the man who made him believe he could stand on that stage and belong. Number 6. Marlon Brando. Hopkins loved Brando not only as an actor, but as a force of nature who changed the way acting was perceived in cinema. From the first time Hopkins watched A Streetcar Named Desire, he was stunned. Brando's Stanley Kowalski didn't feel like a character. It felt like a real man who had been dropped onto the screen with raw energy and unpredictable intensity. Hopkins described Brando's performance as alive in every second, something he himself aspired to bring into his own roles. He studied Brando's movements, his pauses, even the way he listened to other characters, and realized that acting was not about reciting lines. It was about living truthfully in front of the camera. Hopkins recalled how, in his early years, he would go back to watch Brando's films repeatedly, dissecting them like a student trying to decode a master's technique. He watched On the Waterfront countless times, paying close attention to how Brando shifted between moments of vulnerability and bursts of ferocity. Hopkins admitted that the famous "I could have been a contender" scene was one he replayed over and over, not just because it was iconic, but because it carried a humanity that few actors could ever reach.
He was great energy, lived until he was 92, smoked like a chimney.
What Hopkins loved most about Brando was his energy, an electricity that filled every frame. He once said that when Brando was on screen, you couldn't look at anyone else, no matter how crowded the scene. That quality inspired Hopkins to find his own unique energy as an actor, not by imitating Brando, but by learning the lesson that the best performances come when you let go of pretense and allow yourself to exist honestly in the role. Another thing Hopkins admired was Brando's courage. At a time when Hollywood often demanded polish and predictability, Brando refused to conform. His choices were sometimes eccentric, even reckless, but they were always true to his own instincts. He acknowledged that he would have loved to collaborate with Brando in a movie. Hopkins loved Marlon Brando because he was not just an actor, but a teacher from afar. Through his films, Brando gave him lessons in truth, presence, and daring that no acting school could provide. Number 5. Steven Spielberg.
Playing John Quincy Adams in a film called Amistad.
When Hopkins speaks about the great moments of his career, one name always comes up with a kind of warmth that's rare in Hollywood: Steven Spielberg. Hopkins described his time working with Spielberg as one of the most beautiful shooting experiences of his life because of the way Spielberg made him feel as both an actor and a human being. Their most memorable collaboration came in 1993 with Schindler's List, the historical drama that went on to win 7 Academy Awards, including Best Director for Spielberg. Hopkins was not in the film itself, but he was chosen to narrate the powerful documentary The Lost Children of Berlin, produced by Spielberg's Shoah Foundation. Later, their connection deepened when Hopkins starred in Amistad 1997, another Spielberg-directed project that required Hopkins to step into one of his most demanding roles, John Quincy Adams. Hopkins recalled how Spielberg treated the entire cast on Amistad. The subject matter was heavy, dealing with slavery, justice, and freedom, yet Spielberg brought an atmosphere of calm, focus, and quiet encouragement. Hopkins described it as an environment where you felt safe to give your best without fear of judgment. That safety, he said, was what made the experience so beautiful. Spielberg wasn't simply directing actors, he was nurturing them, guiding them gently through the weight of the material. For Hopkins, who had by then already achieved fame through The Silence of the Lambs, Spielberg's way of working stood out as unique. Instead of being a controlling or authoritarian director, Spielberg trusted his actors deeply. He gave them space to explore their roles while offering subtle, precise direction when it mattered most. Hopkins loved that balance, calling it a dance between discipline and freedom. He shared a story about filming the famous courtroom scenes in Amistad. Hopkins had to deliver a nearly 8-minute speech as John Quincy Adams, a daunting task even for an actor of his caliber. Spielberg, rather than overwhelming him with technical instructions, simply told him, "Take your time. We'll be here as long as it takes." Hopkins later said that moment was crucial. It gave him the confidence to perform the speech in a single take, a performance that became one of the highlights of the film. He described Spielberg as a man of vision and kindness, someone who could transform a film set into a place of creativity, safety, and even joy despite the heavy themes being explored. Number 4. Brittany Murphy.
But she was a one-off. She was a unique character.
Just when everyone thought that no female actor would be on his list, Hopkins named Brittany Murphy. For Hopkins, Murphy was not just another Hollywood actress. She was one of a kind, someone whose spirit and artistry separated her from the crowd. He described her as refreshingly unpredictable, an actress who brought something real and alive to every role she played. Brittany Murphy rose to fame in the 1990s with her breakout performance in Clueless, 1995. But Hopkins often noted that her talent went far beyond the teen comedy label. What made her unique in his eyes was her ability to take characters that seemed ordinary on paper and give them depth, vulnerability, and humanity. Whether she was in Girl, Interrupted 1999, 8 Mile 2002, or Don't Say a Word 2001, Murphy had a way of making the audience lean in, almost as though they were peeking into the life of a real person rather than watching a performance. Hopkins admired that quality because it reminded him of the great actors who never looked like they were acting. He also commented that Murphy had a fearless edge, meaning she wasn't afraid to be messy, raw, or unpolished if the role demanded it. Unlike many actors who carefully protected their image, Murphy seemed free of that constraint. She was willing to look vulnerable, to stumble, to cry, to laugh awkwardly, whatever made the performance authentic. Hopkins loved that about her. He also saw her as someone who broke stereotypes. In an industry where female actors were often boxed into limited roles, Murphy had a kind of versatility that set her apart. She could play the sweet outsider, the troubled soul, the comedic sidekick, or the strong romantic lead. Hopkins admired that range and often lamented that Hollywood didn't fully appreciate how extraordinary she was while she was alive. A story Hopkins once shared captured exactly why he admired her so much. After watching 8 Mile, he said he found himself thinking about Murphy's performance for days afterward. While Eminem carried the film's weight as its star, it was Murphy's character, tender, flawed, and heartbreakingly real, that lingered with him. He recalled saying to a friend, "She steals scenes not by trying harder, but by being unapologetically herself." For Hopkins, Brittany Murphy wasn't just talented, she was unique in a way very few actors ever are. She stood outside the mold, refusing to be like everyone else, and in doing so, she earned his admiration forever. Number 3. Robin Williams.
He used to make me laugh a lot. He used to make me laugh. I used to see him sitting in this little chair.
Robin Williams was one of those rare actors who could make people laugh until their stomachs hurt, then just as easily bring them to tears with a moment of raw sincerity. According to Hopkins, Williams was unapologetically funny. Hopkins often said that Robin wasn't just a comedian, he was a force of nature. Hopkins revealed in an interview that he never got tired of watching Robin's work. Whether it was the manic stand-up routines that made it seem like Robin's brain was racing faster than the audience could keep up, or his heartfelt performances in films like Good Will Hunting, 1997, and Dead Poets Society, 1989, Hopkins found himself deeply moved. What impressed him most was how Williams could balance hilarity with humanity. Hopkins said he could be 10 people in one breath, but every one of them felt real. Humor, in Hopkins' opinion, is one of the hardest skills for an actor to master. Many can deliver lines, but very few can truly make people laugh. Williams, however, didn't just make people laugh, he made them laugh uncontrollably. Hopkins admired that Robin's humor wasn't calculated. It felt like a natural explosion of energy, as though his entire being was built for joy and chaos. Hopkins shared that he especially loved watching Williams' improvisation. He described Robin's comedy as like jazz, unpredictable, fluid, and alive in the moment. He remembered watching Mrs. Doubtfire 1993 and being in awe at how Williams switched between characters so seamlessly, creating humor that was outrageous yet completely believable. Hopkins admitted he rewatched that film countless times, not just because it was funny, but because it reminded him of how much talent could live inside one person. But it wasn't just about the comedy. Hopkins loved the heart that came with it. He admired how Robin's roles often carried messages of hope, kindness, and courage. In Patch Adams, 1998, for instance, Williams turned a story about a doctor into something much more, and evidence that laughter itself could be medicine. Hopkins once commented that it was Robin's ability to bring light into dark places that made him so unforgettable. Hopkins also respected how Williams never seemed to take himself too seriously. Despite being one of the most loved entertainers in the world, Robin carried himself with humility and self-deprecating humor. Hopkins found that quality rare in Hollywood, where egos often ran high. Hopkins said that he didn't just love Robin Williams as a performer, he cherished him as an example of what art could be when driven by pure energy and sincerity. Williams made people laugh, cry, and think, often in the same moment, and Hopkins never stopped being amazed by that. Number 2. Colin O'Donoghue.
But he's a really remarkable young man, and he's 25. I mean, that's really...
When Hopkins speaks about young talent, he rarely gets sentimental. But when it comes to Irish actor Colin O'Donoghue, Hopkins becomes almost fatherly. In an interview reflecting on their time working together, Hopkins described Colin as a new talent he sees as a child, and he considers him remarkable. 25 years old, Colin O'Donoghue was still relatively new to Hollywood when he landed his role opposite Hopkins in The Right, 2011, a supernatural thriller about faith, doubt, and exorcism. For a young actor standing alongside one of cinema's greatest legends, the pressure was immense. But Hopkins revealed that O'Donoghue handled it with grace, professionalism, and humility that left a lasting impression. Hopkins admitted that he didn't go easy on Colin during filming. Known for his intensity on set, Hopkins often improvised, challenged his co-stars, and threw unexpected energy into scenes. For some, that unpredictability could be overwhelming, but O'Donoghue didn't flinch. Instead, he rose to every challenge, never losing his composure. Hopkins admired that. What struck Hopkins most was O'Donoghue's ability to listen and really listen. In a scene, acting, Hopkins said, isn't about performing, but about reacting truthfully. He found that O'Donoghue carried a natural presence, a kind of authenticity that made even quiet moments compelling. That quality reminded Hopkins of his own early years, when he struggled to find confidence yet carried an inner strength that great mentors like Richard Burton once recognized in him. Despite the dark and heavy themes of The Right, Hopkins recalled moments of levity between them. Collins' humility and humor balanced the intensity of the shoot, and Hopkins cherished their working relationship. He acknowledged how rare it was to find someone who combined skill, humility, and resilience so seamlessly. Number 1. Ed Harris.
Ed Harris said something very, very bright and sensible, and he's a wonderful actor. One of the students there said,
Hopkins spoke about Ed Harris with genuine affection. Hopkins described Harris as sensible, a word that might sound simple, but coming from Hopkins carries immense weight. Hopkins and Harris first crossed paths in the 1990s, and over the years, their professional respect blossomed into genuine admiration. What Hopkins loved most about Harris was not just his skill as an actor, but his ability to lift the spirits of those around him. On set, while others might be nervous or lost in the chaos of filming, Harris always found a way to encourage, to reassure, and to remind everyone why they were there, to create something meaningful. Hopkins once shared that he had seen countless actors buckle under the pressure of big productions, but Harris was different. He remained calm in moments of stress, level-headed when tempers flared, and always carried an air of quiet confidence that made others feel safe. Hopkins admired this, calling it a rare gift that makes the people around you better. The two worked together in The Human Stain, 2003, and Hopkins recalled how Harris's approach to acting was refreshing. Instead of chasing attention, Harris focused on the story, on the truth of the character. Hopkins, who has always said that acting is about listening and reacting, felt a strong kinship with Harris's method. The two men clicked instantly, exchanging ideas and learning from each other. Hopkins joked that Harris could make even a silent scene feel alive because of the thoughtfulness behind every look and gesture. Off-screen, Hopkins admired Harris for another reason: his humility. Despite being an Academy Award-nominated actor, Harris never carried himself with arrogance. He treated crew members, extras, and younger actors with the same respect he gave to established stars. Hopkins loved that about him. He pointed out that Harris had a way of encouraging others without even realizing he was doing it, whether through a kind word, a quiet nod, or a reassuring smile when someone doubted themselves. Hopkins valued that kind of presence more than flashy talent. The fact that Harris contributed positively to the collective spirit of a production was enough reason to love him, or don't you think so? Let's know your thoughts in the comment section. Subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, like and share.